Hello, and welcome to the Responsive Family Sleep Podcast. I'm your host, Kim Hawley, holistic sleep coach, lactation consultant, peaceful parenting educator, and mom. If you've ever felt overwhelmed by all the conflicting sleep info, frustrated with sleep information that just plain felt wrong, or search desperately for a truly gentle and responsive sleep approach, then you are in the right place. In each episode, we'll be answering your most pressing baby and toddler sleep questions, busting those sleep myths, and helping you understand truly developmental, biologically normal baby and toddler sleep, plus encouraging you to trust your intuition along the way. Let's get started. Hello, and welcome back to the podcast. I am really excited about this week's topic because I feel like a lot of parents struggle with it, and that is perfectionism. And I am certainly not an expert on it, so I am really glad to have a guest for this episode to talk about perfectionism and what is it and how does it show up in our parenting. So, Jillian, thank you so much for joining me for this conversation.
Yes, thank you for having me.
Awesome. Why don't we start off with you sharing a little bit about your work and then we'll jump right in.
Yes, so I am a trauma-informed life and health coach, and I have been on my own recovering healing journey from perfectionism, from people pleasing, because these in my life became maladaptive coping mechanisms, which is just a fancy way of saying they started off as a way as a kid to protect myself, to create the results that I wanted, and they turned into more of a box that I had to try to play within, and it created more harm than it did good. And so
Mhm.
this is something that I work with clients on, whether it's in their health and fitness, in their careers, in their business. It comes out because that is just so often how our brains are wired. It's how we're often trained. And it can be one of those really deeply ingrained patterns that's really hard to let go of. And so
Yeah.
my goal and my hope for everyone here is it's not about recognizing I'm a perfectionist. How do I flip the switch and turn it off? It's okay, I see I'm a perfectionist. Where is it creating more harm than good? And can I start to catch it in more situations and pivot? So it's not so much that it just goes away forever. It's that I'm catching it in more areas and more situations. And I'm learning how to step out of this kind of all or nothing thinking there's a right way to do something and I have to do it this way because typically that sends us down a down a slippery slope of well, if I can't be perfect, I won't do anything at all. So we'll kind of dive into all of these different aspects, but I'm so excited to get to touch on this.
I love that, right? Like that's so this rings so true. For so many parents. I feel like I'm a selective perfectionist in that there's some areas where I'm not at all
Yeah,
and some areas where I am, and it's kind of funny. Not, it's just it's interesting.
that's well, and I think
Those
that's
areas.
actually a really good point of like you might find there are certain areas where you tend to be more perfectionistic and other areas where you're like, whatever, like showing up on time. That's one of those areas that for me, most of the time is like, well, it's close
Oh
enough.
man, that's a
And
bad
then
one
there's,
for me.
yeah.
I hate
And
being
there's
late.
Yeah. Yeah. And I used to be such a perfectionist about it. And then I kind of swung the pendulum and I've kind of come back to like, I really want to respect other people's time. So I'm going to try really hard to show up on time. But there are certain areas where in my mind, I'm like, close enough. Like, it's not going to be the end of the world. And I know that would drive some people crazy, but I think this is good because it'll help us with our parenting, but also I think this will help in your marriage or your relationship with a
Mhm.
co-parent or with your maybe somebody you're dating, because that aspect can be the source of many fights.
Yes. And that like good enough or like it's close enough, like that feels
Mhm.
very close to the concept of like good enough parenting, right? And that we're
Mhm.
never going to be a perfect parent. And that's not actually what our kiddos need.
Yeah.
They do need love and nurturing. They do need us to meet their emotional and relational needs, but we're human and it's going to be messy.
Mhm.
And we're never going to get it 100%.
Mhm. Right.
I feel like I hear all the anxious parents and all the perfectionist parents like cringing whenever I start talking about a secure attachment with folks. And I'm
Uh-huh.
like, always like, this isn't about being perfect. Like, no perfectionism here. Like, that's not what
Hmm.
I'm saying. But also, I always know that there's those people that are going to be like, oh no, I can never do that. And it's like, yes, you can. Yes, you can, because you don't have to be perfect.
Yes, yes. And I actually had a friend and he reminded me, he was like, all rules are just made up anyways. Like somebody just made them up. And yeah, there are going to be some rules that we need to follow. There are certain laws we need to follow, speed limits, stopping at red lights. There are going to be certain rules that are socially accepted that we need to follow. And yet there are going to be so many areas of life where there needs to be, where we're going to feel safer with guidelines. We feel
Hmm.
safer when there is a structure to follow, just like our kids do. But we also need some freedom and flexibility of it doesn't have to look just like this or exactly this way.
Hmm.
And I think the reason why it comes out, why we tend to be perfectionists, is we think if I can do it the right way, I'll get the result that I want. If I can do it the right way, then I'm not going to struggle. My kids won't struggle. We'll create this ultimate end result that is what we truly want. And then I get to feel this way. And then I get to have this experience. And so often it's not so much even about the aspect or the concept. It's like what we think it's going to mean or what it's going to do for us. Sometimes it's also how we view ourselves of like, if I can be perfect, then I'm good enough. I'm worthy of love. Like it can be a very
Hmm.
deep rooted kind of core wound that we have often from childhood around like I get praised, I get recognized when I am quote perfect or if I get, it could go back to like getting straight A's in school or, certain things where it's like your identity becomes kind of wrapped up in that. And if you don't have
Hmm.
that, well, now what's left, right? It kind of leaves these deeper questions.
Hmm. Yeah. I wanted to dig in that, but also when you were talking, just like I hear that so much with sleep. Like if I can get it right and
Mhm.
do it right, then I
Mhm.
will get the sleep outcome I want.
Mhm.
And it's
Mhm.
like humans don't work like that, sadly,
Yeah.
right? Like,
Life doesn't work like
yeah.
that. Yeah.
But sleep is something that feels so out of control, especially if you have
Mhm.
like a highly sensitive
Mhm.
child who is inherently
Mhm.
going to have more trouble with sleep. It's like you're looking for that magic piece and doing it right and being perfect. And it's like that almost creates rigidity that actually makes it harder for you to support them in sleep. But it feels like this is the answer. This is what I have to do,
Mhm.
you
Mhm.
know?
Yeah. Yeah. And so much of this and like achieving any kind of milestone with your kids or any goal, it's like you're going to do some trial and error. And just like
Hmm.
kids learn to walk at different stages, at different times through different progressions, they're
Yes.
going to learn how to sleep through different progressions as well.
Yeah.
And part of this, I think, is like getting the help and support when you need it and reaching out, it's like getting that support and also trusting that there is no one right way that solves it for every single person, every
Yes.
single family, and there's inevitably going to be some trial and error. And I get upset when people try to say
Yes.
that there is one right way. I
Me
like want
too.
to, punch them in the face and be like, stop lying to people. Like, stop it.
Oh my gosh. The number of times I say stuff very similar to what you just said, right? There is not one right way.
Uh-huh.
Every kiddo's path is different. Their temperament is going to have a huge impact, right? When they're ready to
Yeah.
sleep the way that you want them to sleep. So we can work towards that goal, but we can't control the timeline of that,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
And
Right.
that it really is about trial and error, even working with a professional, because I know sleep, you know your kiddo, but neither of us know exactly how they're going to react to a given
Mm-hmm.
thing that
Mm-hmm.
we're doing, and that's okay. That's
Mm-hmm.
gathering information. That is
Mm-hmm.
not a bad thing.
Right. Right. And then you also have things like they're going to get sick.
Hmm.
There's going to be travel. You're going to change time
Hmm.
zones. There's going to be things, then it's like, well, what happens when mom and dad put them down versus a babysitter versus grandma and
Exactly.
grandpa? Or it's like
Yeah.
you've got all these different kind of scenarios that also come up where we can't always control that. And I found that my son had a much easier time going to sleep if I was not the one to put him to bed. And
Hmm.
I could recognize that and be like, oh, thank you, Lord, that there is some like that he goes down better with other people. And sometimes it's easier than to like let somebody else put him down than for me to, because I know it's going to be much more. time consuming.
Mm-hmm.
And, and it's like, and I can release that and I can lovingly let somebody do that instead of staying attached of like, this is my job. I have to do it. It has to be done this way. He's learning how to
Mm-hmm.
fall asleep in different conditions, different circumstances with different people. And it's really helpful for him just as yeah, from a developmental standpoint.
Yeah, I love that. Yeah.
Yeah.
So I want to circle back, right, to the ways that we might develop perfectionist tendencies, kind of as an adaptive, but then not adaptive, maladaptive strategy. I'd love for you to talk a little bit more about that and the way that we were parented, or experiences we had as a kid, and how that can, bring out those perfectionist tendencies in us.
Yeah, yeah. So as we grow and kind of become adults, from the time we're born to 7 years old, we are absorbing everything like a sponge. And
Mm-hmm.
this is where we are learning right and wrong, good and bad. We're learning what it's like to be a part of a family, a community. We're learning how to be loved, how to be accepted, how to be praised. Like so much we're just learning, observing, trying to make sense of the world.
Yep.
And from these young, very young minds, very small world view, a lot of it goes back to me. So it like that's what I know. And
Mm-hmm.
sometimes we feel responsible for other people's emotions or actions. Sometimes at a very young age, we are told that we are responsible for somebody else's actions or emotions. And
Mm-hmm.
especially if this is, well, I have to behave, I have to show up in a certain way to make my parents happy. Or so it might be I have to be act a certain way and be perfect or never be sad, never be upset, never cause any problems so that they don't get angry, so that they don't get upset. And then I receive the brunt of that. So it's very much a
Mm-hmm.
protective mechanism of this is how it's safe in the world, is really what our brains are trying to do and trying to teach us, is just to keep you safe and alive. It's exactly what our human brains as adults are also doing. And that's how they're wired. And we take a lot of what we learned as kids up through 7, and from 7 to 21, we are basically going through and we are finding evidence to prove these thoughts true. So we are reinforcing these thoughts until they become beliefs. They are like etched in stone as like the 10 commandments, which is why it can feel hard to let go of because it's not just something we thought once or twice. It's something we've thought multiple times every day, like our entire lives for decades on end. And so it's helpful to recognize and see, kind of going back, like what did we make it mean? So we often will learn things around like I need to be doing enough, I need to stay busy, otherwise I'm not doing enough, I'm not productive, and that's bad. That now I'm not good enough.
Mm-hmm.
There could be things that you learn about your size, shape, or weight and your body, and something about your body is either not right the way that you are now, or it should look something else in order to be better. And
Mm-hmm.
it doesn't always mean that we were criticized. It might mean that somebody else, like my cousin, for example, was praised for being tall and skinny, and I was not. So in my mind, I made it mean, well, being tall and skinny is really good. I'm not being praised for this. This must be bad. Something else must be wrong. I was praised
Mm-hmm.
for other things, but maybe not in that way, right? And so again, it's like this young 6, 7, maybe even 8 year old is just trying to make sense of it. And so then it's learning, okay, if I look this way, if I show up this way, then I can control this situation. And this is often where perfectionism kind of plays and falls in line with people pleasing, because people pleasing is it's simply over functioning. It's taking responsibility for somebody else's emotions, words, or actions, that like in a good way or a bad way. So
Mm-hmm.
it's if you are upset, it's my fault and now it's also my responsibility to fix. So if I can be perfect, I'm not going to make you upset. Right? We learn some like subtle things of like if this then that. And it's not always
Mm-hmm.
accurate. It's not always like it does not create a secure attachment. It's not always healthy, but it's what we learned. And if we don't relearn a new way, if we don't create a new pathway in our brain, we will by default always keep recreating that, even though we don't want to. And I think this is one of the best things that we can do as parents is really understand and work on ourselves. By working on yourself and your healing, your growth, you will by default naturally be a better parent for your kids. And you have a much
Yes.
better chance of actually changing patterns, changing cycles and stories versus not working on yourself and just trying to focus on like showing up in a certain way that's different for your kids, but you're not actually getting to the root of what was causing it to begin with.
Yeah.
So it can come from like a negative experience or from a positive one. You might have had a sibling who maybe was sick or ill. And so you learned you have to be the easy one. You have to be the healthy one. You have to be the one who gets good grades because your sibling struggles in school. And it's like, I have to show up in this way. It could have started as like a friendly competition of like the girl on the bus bragging about her 100% on her test. And you're like, I could get 100% too. Watch me. And it turns into, kind of this striving of like I'm better or I'm good enough because I got these grades because I did this action. And while it works in school, it doesn't work in real life, which is
Mm-hmm.
kind of the challenge in my opinion of schooling today. Is like it does not set us up to be entrepreneurs, business owners, creative thinkers, problem solvers. It sets us up to learn A plus B equals C. It sets us up to memorize information and regurgitate it. I know it's kind of a slightly different topic, but like,
It's true though. It's
yeah,
it's it's totally true. Yeah.
yeah. So the more that we can understand, like, this is what we learned. We learned kind of these perfectionist tendencies of if I can just have the right formula, if I know the right plan, if I know the right answer, that I'm going to get the result that I want. And life doesn't work that way. Now we're trying to like relearn and handle things like failure and when maybe we've never had to struggle that hard before with it. And it can be really tricky. It can be really hard.
Yeah, and I feel like so much about early parenting is out of our control that not only are we like learning all these new skills, but we're grappling with a time in our life where so much of our experience is out of our control on so many fronts, right?
Mm-hmm.
How your birth goes, the
Mm-hmm.
specifics of your feeding journey, the specifics of your sleep
Yeah.
journey, right? All these things that are often very tied up in strong emotions and also a lot of rules and you should want to do this, it should look like that. And there's so much that's out of our control. And then you bring in some perfectionists or people-pleasing tendencies,
Mm-hmm.
and like it's it's tricky, right? It's a lot.
Mhm. Yeah. Yeah, it is. And we want to feel like good parents and we don't want to hurt our kids. We don't want to do any harm. And I think there's a lot of fear too of like
Hmm.
if I'm perfect, if I do it the right way, then they won't be harmed. Then they'll have the best experience. But if I make a mistake, if I get something wrong, now I'm doing harm. Now I'm hurting them.
Yeah.
And we can get really caught up in these false dichotomies instead of recognizing like and us coming to terms with making mistakes, us coming to terms with feeling like I failed as a parent. And then now what do I do from there? How do we move forward in a productive way? And teaching and showing your kids it's okay to apologize. I think
Hmm.
that's something like my dad never did. I don't think don't, there may have been times, but it's like I remember my mom apologizing on his behalf. I remember her coming to comfort and soothe me, but I don't remember him ever saying, I'm really sorry, Jilly. I should not have yelled at you like that. That was not appropriate and I'm really sorry. Like
Hmm.
simple little things like that.
Yeah.
Um, and
That
so
repair matters.
yeah, yeah. So
Yeah.
I think there, especially and for me, kind of recognizing now as an adult that I had a very traumatic childhood and there was a more trauma than I, realized. It's, it can be kind of hard because I'm thinking, well, I don't want to do that to my son either. So there's also
Hmm.
some fear there too of like, what if I am doing something really wrong? Or what if I don't get it right? Or I don't fix this?
Hmm. Yeah, it's hard because inevitably parents are going to make mistakes, right? We're going to
Yeah.
be misattuned. We're going to look back and
Yeah.
be like, gosh, could have handled that better, right?
Right.
Like, and I know when I'm talking with families about that, I talk a lot about repair, right? Like
Yeah.
rupture and repair being a normal part of relationships and self-compassion. But like, yeah, there's just it's such a learning curve
Hmm.
for
Hmm.
everybody as a new parent, and just throughout parenthood. I mean, like my oldest is 12. I've never had a 12-year-old before. Like it's all new. The
Yeah.
whole tween years are all
Right.
new. Just
Right.
like having a baby was new and a toddler was new. And my daughter is very different than my son was at that age. So it's still new, even though she's not my first kiddo at that age. And
Yeah.
so it's it's a learning curve no matter what. But those first years, I
Yeah.
feel like the stakes feel very high and it is very
Mm-hmm.
intense.
Mm-hmm.
And I know with sleep, oh man, I think there's so much
Mm-hmm.
fear-based messaging around sleep and so much of that one size fits all, like it should look like this or else, all these dire things that are just
Yep.
ridiculous. But
Yep.
really manipulate parents. And so if you come into that as more of a perfectionist, it's a really hard landscape to navigate.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah. And and by many standards, I did sleep wrong with my son. He's now 4, but for the first 6, almost 7 months, he co-slept with me in the bed. He's now my ex-husband, but we were married at the time and he slept in the guest room and
That's
he
not
was
wrong.
like, "You do you." And I felt like I couldn't put him down or he'd start crying. And so I
Hmm.
just found like I could sleep and he could sleep if we were close. And so I was like,
Yeah,
"All right."
that's
And it
normal.
semi worked, like it worked good enough. But then there came a point where I was like, I'm not like, I can't think straight. This is like hurting my memory. Like I can't remember things. Like
Hmm.
there's mom brain and then there's like sleep deprived brain. And it was never super extreme, but it was enough to where I was just not feeling like myself. And my best friend came to visit and she was like, "Here, give me your baby." And she's like, swaddling him and wrapping him up like a little burrito. And he's like, "This is what you got to do." And after that, like the sleep got much better. And then I could actually put him in his crib and he could sleep well. And now he like doesn't want to get out of his crib. Now he's 4 and like doesn't want to leave the crib and go to his big boy bed. So it's like
New
there's always
challenges.
yeah, yeah. There's always going to be like something else that comes up. And I'm like, you know what, kid, if you want to stay there, like you are fine. And there are some nights where he'll come into my bed and he'll sleep in my bed. And
Hmm.
usually that's only if he wakes up in the middle of the night at like 2 a.m., 3 a.m., something like that, and has a hard time going back to sleep. But, it's like, yeah, could I have done things better? Are there things that I wish I would have known sooner or things that I would have done differently? Absolutely. And now, if I have another kid, I know what to do a little different. And I also know it's going to be a new child that might not work. And,
Yep, I was about to
that's
say
okay.
that. I was like, I say that to parents all the time with their second kiddo is like, you can't just like do what you wish you had done differently with your next
Yeah.
kiddo because they're different. And honestly,
Yeah.
co-sleeping's normal. It's our biological norm. And so like
Yeah.
in my practice, it's a totally valid tool. It gets
Uh-huh.
most parents more sleep, but that
Uh-huh.
doesn't mean it's a tool for everybody, right? And
Right.
so a
Right.
tool is not good or bad, assuming that you're doing it safely. It is simply, is this working for you? And if the answer
Yeah.
is no, then we need to find other tools, right? The answer is
Right. I love
yes.
that.
Then we need
Mm-hmm.
to tune out all the BS that's out there
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
because most of the things that our like society says are doing sleep wrong are actually like very biologically normative and
Mm-hmm.
only wrong in Western culture. Not
Yeah.
wrong once you look at it through biology and human evolution and cross-cultural lenses. So
Yeah.
I am always like disrupting the narrative on this kind of stuff.
I love that.
Um,
Yes. But
but
it's
it
so
also has to
good
work
that
for you, right? Like it
right.
has to work for you.
Right.
And so it doesn't matter if co-sleeping is normal if it wasn't actually working for you,
Right.
because then
Yes.
we're not getting the benefit that we want from it.
Yeah. 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 No, I think I got way more sleep by doing that than trying to put him down and have him wake up 10, 15 minutes later.
Yeah.
And there's all the methods of like crying it out and,
Yeah.
different things like that. And I did have to get better at allowing like giving him time to soothe if he was going to do it. But it was usually like within a couple minutes. And if it went on more than like 5, 6 minutes for me, then I would go pick him up. But usually it's like within those first couple of minutes, but there's so much I think of our own fear and of course I'm like I don't want to traumatize him. I want to create that secure attachment and like
Yeah.
want him to know he's safe. And so it's yeah, there's a lot of emotions that play into this aspect of sleeping.
Yeah, and I mean, with sleep, it's also that we rarely have all the options, right? Like,
Mhm.
if I were coming into that situation with you, I would be giving you completely different strategies
Mhm.
because I don't really do the variations of like putting them down and leaving them to settle.
Mhm.
That's
Mhm.
not how I work on crib sleep, right? And but that's like
Mhm.
that's sort of you don't as a parent necessarily see the full spread
Mhm.
of sleep strategies unless you go on a real intentional hunt and you're still not seeing the full spread. Versus
Yeah.
those of us who like see the spread and are like, I see where that situates, but parents don't often see where that situates.
Right. Right. We're told here's the right way to do it.
And we
Here's
just
what it should look like.
do the best we
Yeah.
can, you
Yeah.
know? Yeah.
Yeah. Totally.
I see that perfectionist tendency too when parents do sleep train and then it doesn't work for them. And they're like, I didn't want to do it in the first place. And now I made that huge mistake in it. And then that, like,
Mm-hmm.
I did it wrong,
Mm-hmm.
comes up too.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think so much of it is like trust yourself, trust your gut, trust your intuition. And if something doesn't feel right or feel aligned, then like move to something else. But I think just like with any other goal that we might be trying to achieve, you might need to find a different, like maybe you find a different book, a different method, a different strategy. Like you've got to keep trying some
Hmm.
different things. And I know for me, why one of the biggest hurdles that I've overcome in my life has been binge eating. And I was a binge eater for 12 years. And I haven't binged now in the last 5. Like it's been huge. But it
Hmm.
took many different programs and coaches and memberships and books and like a lot of different strategies of just trying to figure this out and getting to the point where it was like I was then ready to implement and figure out, okay, what is actually going on for me from a diet brainwashing standpoint and then an emotional
Hmm.
standpoint. And that was just the journey that I had to go on and be
Yeah.
on. And I've learned so much from that. And it's like I had to try some new things. I did, and I'd never regretted trying something that didn't work. I always saw it
Hmm.
as, okay, I thought this was it. Turns out that's not actually going to be as helpful as I thought. That's okay. I'm going to pivot. Let me look at something else. Let me go someplace else and look at what else could I do? What other options do I have? And and there were some things that I also knew I didn't want to try because I wasn't ready. I wasn't comfortable with that. So I think there are so many there's so many different options out there. We just have to give ourselves the permission to try, to fail, to try something new. Yeah.
Yeah. You learn so much from trying, right?
Yep.
Experimenting.
Yep.
So I like perfectionism, right? I see it with sleep a lot. I see it with schedules a lot. I see it with like the right way to introduce food, the right,
Mm-hmm.
I don't know, the right stimulation, like so much
Mm-hmm.
of this, like all these right things. And in those early years, we are like as you mentioned, we're and I talk about a lot with attachment, like we're doing a lot of modeling for our kiddos. They're absorbing so much of what they see. So when we are noticing these perfectionist tendencies creep up, I'd love to hear your thoughts. Like what should a parent do? Like how might they notice and reflect in a helpful way to not model beating themselves up in
Mm-hmm.
a perfectionist way to their kids, but maybe model something better.
Yeah. So I think with perfectionism, one way to see if you're kind of falling into this habit is thinking there's a right way and a wrong way. And it's usually there's two extremes and there's no middle ground. They like
Hmm.
we're either in the black or the white. There's no gray. And really so much of life happens in the gray, in this middle ground. And it's not in the extremes, but just starting to recognize like it usually it's going to be more of a negative emotion that triggers this. So when you're feeling frustrated, if you feel like a failure, if you feel shame, guilt, regret, usually it's going to be more of a negative emotion that we feel like we've done something wrong, we've done something bad, we didn't do it the right way. And we are like, that is typically what's kind of in our brain is creating this false dichotomy. So it's this
Hmm.
false belief that there's only two options and it's either right or it's wrong. You either pass or you fail. And we have to start to step into that like B plus work, that good enough work, that good enough parenting, the aspects where it's like, okay, what's the goal? How can we get there effectively? So if the goal is to
Hmm.
get dinner out and have everybody eating by 6 p.m., some days might look like mac and cheese and hot dogs, and they maybe there's a little broccoli on the side, or some my son likes bell pepper, like he used to eat a lot more vegetables than he does now, and that's okay, right? It's like not making that a problem either, but just giving him those options.
Hmm.
And it's not making it be so quote perfect of like you can never eat processed foods, or you can never go out to eat, or you can never do this, right? It's like really finding what works for your lifestyle and how do we live in this kind of like pleasant, enjoyable experience of life where we're not so extreme. We're not trying so hard to get a certain goal, a certain outcome. It's like, okay, if the goal is dinner's out by 6, we don't have to be so rigid about what is included in dinner. Some nights it might look a little different. Some nights you might, have a great spread and you've got, the perfect match of like, your roasted chicken and broccoli and asparagus and mashed potatoes or rice or whatever, right? You might have like this really wonderful, amazing balanced dinner, and other nights it might be Chick-fil-A. And it's like, all right, knowing that one meal is not going to hurt everybody and
Mm-hmm.
really starting to teach moderation. And when we can teach our kids moderation, when we can teach our kids that it's okay and it's safe to lose, we can have fun playing the game. When we can teach them that it's about their effort and how they're trying, not about the outcome, when we praise the effort and the trying,
Yeah.
then we create such a better and more stable environment for them to have that permission to make mistakes, to fail, to keep going. And I think we see this so easily with like a child learning to walk, where it's like they start to stand and then they fall down. And we're like, that's okay. Good job. Keep going. Like we're so excited that they started to stand, even if they were holding on to something, or like
Mm-hmm.
they don't start walking on their own for months, but yet that whole time we are praising and encouraging and we're looking at the effort, not, well, did they actually walk? And if we can keep that perspective in mind for them their entire lives, that would be huge. And if we can really learn to apply that to ourselves, of like really praising the effort, the intention, the attempt, right? It's like we're not going to make all the free throws in life, but can we at least get out there and be shooting the ball and looking at, okay, that didn't work so well. How can I adjust? What will I do differently next time? I think we truly have to learn from our mistakes and our failures, and we can't learn if we're just sitting in shame and regret and sorrow and feeling like a terrible person and a terrible parent. We have to be
Yeah.
able to shift out of that negative emotion so that we can learn from it and figure out, what will I do differently next time? That's such an important piece that we often are quick to throw out and just say, well, that didn't work, or I failed, or versus like really understanding, here's what worked, here's what didn't work or didn't go so well. Here's what I'm going to do differently next time. Here's the small tweak. Here's the small change that I can make. And that that's just the approach we need to have throughout life, that I feel like, I don't know that I was ever really taught that. I think many people were not actually taught, how do we overcome failure, overcome mistakes, overcome resistance, because it's always just like this, pass or fail, just do this thing, follow
Mm-hmm.
this recipe, get this result, and it doesn't always work.
No, I love that. I love the walking analogy. I think that's a really great way of thinking about it, you know? Because I've been reading about the like praising effort since, gosh, my oldest was a toddler.
Yeah.
And like I remember at first being like, WTAF, are you talking about? Because like
Yeah.
having trouble like getting it, but like having trouble thinking about how do you actually implement it.
Yeah.
And of course, I mean, he's 12 now, so like I've had plenty of time to process it, but I really like that way of framing it because you're right. We like naturally are really encouraging of effort in that space,
Hmm.
not the outcome so
Hmm.
much.
You're right. So yeah, so then it's looking at how could we apply that to food and to them eating, to them trying new foods, praising when they eat one bite. Then maybe they don't eat all 4 pieces you put on their plate or on their high chair, but they eat one of them. Really encouraging that and validating that. And I think that is one of the biggest pieces and one of the biggest ways that we can help model and show them how they can do that for themselves too. So
Hmm.
not only will we hopefully start doing that for ourselves, but then if they can be doing that for them, because this is like, even though they're really young now, uh, these are the ages where they start to learn these perfectionist habits and these traits of like, here's how I have to act, here's how I have to behave.
Yeah.
And I see this with my son sometimes too. He'll go to his dad's, and I know he has to be within, in certain behavior. He's not allowed to whine. He's not allowed to be, he's not allowed to have certain emotions. And I say like have in terms of like,
Hmm.
there's reprimands, there's, some kind of aspect where he is learning, I have to show up a certain way at dad's house. And there's like a little more freedom and flexibility with still some boundaries, but around that emotional acceptance at mom's house. And so I
Mm-hmm.
think there's even trickiness that kind of comes into play with co-parenting, but it's really validating and letting them know too of like your emotions are not a bad thing either. And it's okay to feel them. It's okay to experience them. Let's start to talk about them. And you also can't hit me. You also can't hit your sibling.
Yes.
You also,
Yes.
right? There's still
Yes.
certain boundaries around like you can be upset, but you do not get to scream at the top of your lungs. Like that's not okay.
I love, I don't remember which parenting coach, but I'm sure many of them say it that I follow, right? That we are setting the boundary around the behavior and we're welcoming the emotion,
Mm-hmm.
as opposed
Yeah.
to trying to create boundaries on other people's emotions. That's where it's not healthy. So, like, they're allowed to
Yes.
be upset.
Yeah.
We want to hold space for that.
Yeah.
And yes, we do want to set a limit around hitting your sister when she
Right.
knocked over your Lego thing or whatever. You can be upset the Legos got destroyed, thing got destroyed, but we don't get to hit your sister because you're upset the Lego thing got destroyed.
Mhm.
But yeah, I mean, I think that having that space to experience emotions and hold space for those emotions and then model like, oh, I made a mistake and I repaired and I'm not going to go beat myself up about it forever and ever and ever.
Mhm.
Like that's really powerful to model for them.
Yeah. Yeah. There's a lot of self-forgiveness that comes into play here too. And I think, and we get into some touchy subjects when it comes to forgiving other people. And there can be a lot of different religious views on that and, maybe family views on like, well, we're family, you have to. But I think where this impacts the most is, are you able to forgive yourself? And
Hmm.
maybe for certain offenses, you can, but for really big ones, can you forgive yourself? And I think that it's like part of it is really allowing yourself to feel and process through all the emotions and also know that you are not this terrible human being just because this happened or you had this result or I work with so many clients who they feel so much guilt and shame over things that happened 10, 20, 30 years ago, whether it's around food and weight loss, whether it's in marriage and divorce, whether it's with money and spending or buying a house or buying a car or we have
Hmm.
all different things that we kind of hold over our heads and we then make come to these conclusions of like, well, I'm just bad with money. I'm just not good at making decisions. I'm just bad at picking a spouse. I'm right. And we
Hmm.
really limit ourselves and we have to be able to forgive ourselves so that our kids also learn how to forgive themselves.
Yeah.
And again, this is like some of the deep work that is going to be so profound and so impactful when we truly learn how to do it and honestly believe it.
Hmm. Yeah, early parenting or parenting in general, it's such an opportunity and a shove into
Right.
self-reflection and really
Yeah.
unpacking these pieces of ourselves for our own benefit, but also so that we can shift these patterns and we can model different patterns to our kiddos.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. And know that, like, and I've also made peace and know that, like, my son may need therapy. He may need a coach to process through something he experienced as a kid. And that's okay because part of it too is it's not just what happens, it's what they make it mean. And
Hmm.
we can't always control that. We can do as much as we can to try to ensure that our thoughts, emotions, motives, that everything gets portrayed as best as we can. But at the end of the day, like I can't control what my son makes something mean. And
Yeah.
while the divorce was not because of him, and he was almost 3 when we got divorced, he might make it about him and he may have some abandonment wounds and some things that he's going to have to work through as an adult. And that is part of his journey. And that's going to make him a better man. I can't
Hmm.
protect him from all of that. And to be honest, I don't think that's good for him to try to. I think there are going to be some things where he's going to have to experience and that's going to make him a better person. It's going to make him a better father one day. It's going to make him a better husband one day, potentially. It's going to make him a better person, a better employee, a better manager, right? It's like this is what's going to set them up for success. And it's those kind of hard moments sometimes. But I know like it's been my struggles, my challenges that have made me a better person and
Hmm.
learning from it. And being on those paths of recreating the same problem over and over again, not getting the results I wanted, feeling so frustrated, and then deciding, okay, I've got to figure this out. I need to do something about this.
Yeah, we can have hard things that happen that are not fully in our control, and then we can support our kiddos through them, right? As best as we can. But yeah, I
Yeah.
really like what you're saying. Like we can't control the meaning they make of them. And
Yeah.
that's not our burden to take on. We just need to show up as best that we can and support them as best that we can. And then that's 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 what we do have control over.
Right. Yes, exactly. You control you. You control your emotions, your thoughts, your actions, and you let other people control theirs. And it's easier said than done.
Yeah.
Um,
Yes. I feel like you've touched on so many great things. Do you think there's anything we haven't really touched on? I mean, I know there's things we haven't touched on, but anything you want to wrap up our conversation with about, perfectionism and how it shows up in early
Yeah, so I
parenting?
think one of the best places to kind of start is like, what am I making this mean? So it's like, if this happens, if we get this result, or if I do it this way, what am I making this mean? And really start to understand like what's underneath this, because so often it's like we're doing things kind of on autopilot, or because we think we have to, or we think we should, or it's the right way, and we don't always stop to kind of reflect on like, what am I making it mean that I'm doing it this way, or the right way, or we get this outcome. And so that is just, it's a great place to start exploring and getting to some of these deeper aspects and deeper levels of like, okay, like, where are my perfectionist tendencies? And I think as parents, we probably already recognize like when we have them, and also knowing like it's okay. There may be some jobs where it's like, a brain surgeon, I kind of want you to be a perfectionist,
Seriously.
open heart surgeon. Like,
Yes.
I would really prefer if you were a perfectionist, please. Not like, yeah, good enough right there,
No,
you know,
thanks.
but kind of recognizing like there might be some areas where we have to be very particular, very detail oriented. There is not much margin for error, and there are going to be areas where we don't have to be that rigid. Your kids are, and I think this is the other piece, is like your kids are not a reflection of you and how good of a parent you are. And I think it's like detaching some of these beliefs from like what's happening, and like, yeah, it's gonna be thoughts and beliefs like that. But I think that phrase of like, what am I making this mean, is a great place to start exploring this deeper.
I love that. I think that's a really lovely way to wrap up this conversation. Share with families where they can find you, where they can connect.
Yeah, so what you can connect with me on Instagram. I'm at Jillian Amadea, and my website is bodyyoucrave.com if you want to go connect with me there. And my podcast is called Hungry for Love. And so I talk about body image, weight loss, emotional eating, binge eating, and then also weave in kind of this deep core desire that we have to be loved, accepted, valued. And sometimes we are searching for that with food, or in toxic relationships, and through other means. And so it's, how do we really start to meet our own emotional needs so that we can also help other people and like give them that responsibility, so you can help your kids learn what that looks like to meet their own emotional needs.
Awesome. Thank you so much for this great conversation.
Yes, thank you again for having me.
Thank you for joining me today. I hope this episode left you feeling more informed, confident, and encouraged on your sleep journey. And just a reminder before you go that nothing in this episode is individualized to your specific sleep situation, nor is it to be taken as medical advice. Take what resonates, ignore what doesn't, and check with your healthcare provider about any medical concerns. Take a moment to subscribe to this podcast so that you'll never miss an episode. And take a moment to rate, review, or share an episode you love on social media. All of that helps parents just like you find me, this podcast, and this gentle and responsive sleep information. I'll see you next time.